You're on a Yeti?
I am. This is my portable podcasting studio.
Okay, so that means you are mobile. Where are you?
I am in Door County, Sister Bay to be precise.
Okay, vacation?
Kind of working vacation.
Okay.
My parents have a place in Sister Bay, and I can work from anywhere. So we came up Sunday night, and we just been hanging out up here, and I've been working remote. Even funny anecdote about this, Sister Bay, which is about 800 people, actually has better internet than I can buy in Neenah, Wisconsin, where I live. So this is better internet than my house, even though Neenah is probably, gosh, I don't know, 20 times the size. No, not 20 times. Yeah, 20 times the size.
Wow. And you have pretty good internet at home, I feel like.
Yeah, it's okay. Usually when I record, I'm at the co-working space, which is in Appleton. It's a little bit bigger town, and that actually has a fiber connection.
Right. Because I remember you telling me that you had a pretty good data connection at your co-working space, but I guess I was comparing it to that. So so your co-working space in comparison to your house, is there a big difference in speed there?
Upload, yeah. I mean, the fastest I can get at home is 5 up, but at the co-working space, it's 50 down, 50 up.
Oh, wow. See, everybody looks at the download speeds, but we're podcasters and we do, like, we're uploading video files and stuff. They're big files. So upload speed is very important.
Definitely. All right. You're going to have to cut this part out, but I'm going to have to move my microphone up a little bit because I can't hunch over the entire episode. There we go.
Maybe I should leave this in.
I created a makeshift standing desk.
A makeshift standing desk. Now, see, right before we started, because I know that you record standing up, right? Yep. You like to stand up and talk. I always sit at my desk with, I have a Herman Miller Aeron that I use for a desk chair. Super nice chair. Love them. Crazy expensive. Okay, we're not going to go down that train. But I have debated trying to find a way to raise my microphone so that I can stand and podcast. I don't know if that would change the way that I have conversations on a mic or not. I know a lot of people seem to think it makes a big difference. I've never tried it, so I can't speak to that in any way. But you seem to like it.
I do. Now, maybe listeners to Bookworm might think a little bit differently, but I am much more animated when I'm standing up. And that's something that I've had to learn and develop as I've done podcasting and it just comes from recording and then hearing the episodes after they go live. When I first started, it was very, very monotone and honestly very boring to listen to. So I'm hoping that is not the case anymore. But one of the things that I do to kind of trick myself to being a little bit more animated is I don't normally do this, but when I podcast, I try to talk with my hands. So having a microphone on a desk, though, this could be tricky. I might accidentally whack the microphone a few times.
Well, don't hit the mic, because then I have to edit more. So that would mean that if I stand up, well, that you normally record, like you have a boom stand for your mic, so that way you're not whacking it. Okay, that makes sense. Okay. I may try this the next time we record or something. I don't know. I have to find a way to mount it because I'm currently mounting my boom stand. It's not on my desk, but it's attached to like a shelf that's the same height as my desk, and I can't get it up high enough to stand for it. I tried. So I would need to do something like mount something to the wall so that I can then mount the mic to the thing I mounted to the wall. It's not as simple as just raise it up. So I want to try this at some point.
Yeah, I have an electric standing desk, and it's awesome because you can program the heights. So I have one for sitting, one for standing, and I don't know why, but I absolutely love hitting the button, hearing it go.
This is what you do on your breaks, right? You just raise your desk and lower it back and forth.
I'm going to take advantage of that Jarvis 7-year warranty.
See if I can get this thing to wear out. then I can get a new one. Let's go through our follow-up. We've got some fun things here. You put on Roger Bustle's poetry. I haven't looked at this. I'm going to click the link now.
Yeah, so we mentioned this in the last episode, and I dropped the ball and didn't get you the link. So I wanted to just throw that in here because Roger listened to the episode and was pretty thrilled that we gave him a shout out. So here's another one, Roger, and we're actually going to include the link this time. And it's totally my fault because I didn't get it to you right away, and then was kind of surprised when the episode came out a few days later. So good job, Joe, on turning that one around.
So for the listeners, I'm usually quite slow at getting episodes released. I think Mike's probably used to my 1.5 week turnaround after we record. And that one I got out in like 2 days. So I will say that's my fault more than Mike's fault.
Well, I did, honestly, I will admit that I forgot about the link. I probably would have remembered it at some point, maybe when I saw you at MacStock. And I think that's why you turned it around so quick. But
right, because I knew that we were going to be seeing each other at MacStock, and I wanted that one out before we saw each other. That way we would because we potentially were going to record at MacStock, but it didn't work out. We always plan to do that, but it's so we get busy and it just doesn't work out, I don't think. But it's something
planning
that
fallacy.
There's one of these, we're gonna jump into the book here quick. So there's a lot of reasons that we just don't get there, but we always intend to, but yeah. So anyway, I got this one out, the last one out in a couple days, and Mike didn't have a chance to send me this. So I'm now looking through Roger's poetry. I like this stuff. It's good.
I know that it's really good. That's why I wanted to include the link to it. It's not just somebody who says like, yeah, I'm going to post something. Like I am really impressed by the quality of this poetry. I could not do this.
I played around with poetry at one point. There is a reason I don't publish it anywhere. I don't ever plan to do this.
Right.
But go Roger. Well done.
So next one here, speaking of MacStock, and I just threw this on here, so I'm kind of putting you on the spot.
You are putting me on the spot. I realize this as I'm finishing up this conversation on Roger. Oh, Mike threw this in here. Okay.
Yeah. So we were at MacStock, and I spoke at MacStock. And I gave a deeper dive, both of them on the topic of email. And since we've talked about email multiple times on Bookworm, I feel like we have to have at least one takeaway that you got from either of my talks at MacStock.
So here's the thing I got. I will tell you, there's one big thing that's made a pretty big impact on my email habits, because I get a lot of email. We've talked about this before. I did some things. It cut back on my email. Then I did some more client work and got more into that, which means my email started to get heavy again. So despite all of my work to make sure email doesn't bombard me, I'm still bombarded by email. So I have learned that I can't say that I like email. I really don't like going through email. I don't like the process of processing it. To use the same word twice there. But I do know that there's a very specific pattern that you should go through when you're doing email. And whenever I listen to you, Mike, talk about the email flow and how all that should work, I have followed that for a long time. So it's great to have the confirmation that I'm doing the right thing from an Asian efficiency professional here.
Confirmation bias.
There you go. So I really appreciated the confirmation piece there, because I feel better about myself, because, that's the way our cognitive biases work. But in the process, one of the things that you mentioned offhand, I think, because you didn't really dive into it in much detail, was the inverse sorting, so that you've got the oldest at the top.
Mm-hmm.
And it seems like a lot of people don't do this. I have wanted to do this for a long time, but I've used Gmail for a long time. And I talked about a few episodes ago now on Whims at Work that I moved away from Gmail over to Apple Mail, which a lot of people really didn't like and sent me emails about, which is great and interesting at the same time. Because, okay, so long story short, the only reason I made that shift was because of Touch Bar, which I know a lot of people don't care for, love it. So you guys can just... You send me the hate email if you want on that. I still like Touch Bar. You're not going to convince me otherwise. But I realized in the process of using Apple Mail in conjunction with Touch Bar that it works a lot like Gmail with the single keystrokes. You can set up the Touch Bar in order to enable that functionality. Well, I was considering a move to MailMate per Mike, and I downloaded MailMate. I was trying it because it's the one Mike likes to use, and I figured if Mike is using it, maybe I should consider this. But I didn't follow through with that, Mike, so that's not the one thing. But it did at least prompt me to explore Apple Mail a little bit, and I realized you can inverse sort in Apple Mail now. I did not know that until I started trying to figure out how I could do it, and it's built in. I just had to turn it on.
Nice.
So I did do that, and it means all the old stuff showed up at the top, and I didn't realize that I was holding things in my inbox. So between those two, I'm getting better at email, Mike. So thank you for that.
Sweet. One step at a time.
So there you go. There's my one thing from MacStock from your talk. Well done, sir. Now, I should point out, Mike did something at MacStock that kind of caught some people off guard, because when you're giving talks, especially about Mac computers, it's very tempting to want to do like a live demonstration of a specific application. And a few people tried to do this. Some of that is dependent on getting a good Wi-Fi signal, which there were issues with this year at MacStock. And it has a lot of problems if you try to just play a recorded video. So if you're giving a talk and you're going to do something like a live demo, you need to do something like what Mike did, which was to record the demo as a screencast and then break said screencast up into little bits such that you can advance it as you want. Mike did a very good job with this. Well done, sir. So it was very interesting to watch, because you were able to take that, what would have been a very difficult screencast to do a voiceover on live, and get it to work perfectly. I know there were a few people that posted about this afterwards, Mike, that were sitting there. They missed out on like what you were talking about with email, because they were so caught up in how is he doing that? Like that is, what is he doing? So yeah, there was a few folks that were very impressed, and I was too. So well done.
Cool. Yeah, just a little bit more description, I guess, on exactly what I did for anyone who wants to steal this strategy. Like Joe said, I recorded the video in ScreenFlow of like getting notifications, things like that, and then I cut it up into tiny videos, and then placed those videos in a Keynote presentation on separate slides, which autoplayed when you loaded the slide. So that meant that while I was presenting, I didn't have to be at my computer even. I had the clicker, and every time I hit the forward arrow on the clicker, or the forward button on the clicker, then it would play the next piece. But on the screen behind me, it just showed my screen. And so it would hold the last frame of the video, my mouse in a certain position, and then I'd pick up the video there on the next one. And it looked like I was controlling everything with the clicker, but I wasn't. I was just playing a bunch of little videos with the spacing so that I could narrate over them. Does that make sense?
It makes sense to me, but I got to see it behind the scenes, so that happens. But it was interesting. I hadn't thought to do something like that. I don't do screencasts live like that really ever, but if I ever need to, you can be sure I'm stealing this one.
Yeah, so what that allowed me to do is, like, there's one spot in particular where I wanted a notification to play at the exact right time with the sound, and I was able to trigger that with the clicker rather than sending the email and waiting sometimes 5 seconds, sometimes 5 minutes for the email to show up and then the notification to play, and having to sit there and be like, okay, just wait for it.
Yeah, and that was the piece that really confused people, because they were like, how did he... Because there were a couple of folks that thought you were actually doing the live demo, and they could not figure out how you had triggered the notification to come exactly when you wanted. There was a few folks in front of me that were like looking at each other like, what did... They were so confused. It was great.
That's funny.
So that was MacStock. I enjoyed it. It was a good time. I like MacStock.
And if you like Macs or Apple things, you should come to MacStock next year, dear listener.
And we can hang out. Like we can meet each other. It'd be fun. We'll talk about books at a Mac conference. All right.
All right, then I've got a whole bunch here, which you're not going to be able to hold me accountable to because I don't know how to quantify these necessarily. I'm not tracking every time I don't use a power-based no. But just running through these real quickly, these are the things I wrote down from last time. I wanted to show respect to other people before responding. I wanted to not use power-based no's. I wanted to not use no's without proposing a yes. I wanted to use positive framing when proposing a yes. And I wanted to use I would prefer not to. So I can tell you that progress has been made, but I can also tell you that I have not used I would prefer not to yet. And that probably means that I'm not saying no enough, but I don't know that for sure. I feel like in the last couple weeks, even couple months, I've done a pretty decent job of editing the things that I am committed to. And the things that I am doing now really are the right things. And so I kind of think that partly this has kind of been set in motion before we read this book. And so I haven't had the opportunity to use these in practice as much as I maybe would have, 6 months ago. But I do think that my mindset has shifted, specifically the one about showing respect to other people before responding. Like that one really hit me. And I try to, every single request that I get, have that different mindset where it's not just like, well, no, I can't do that. Example, the other day, I'm in Door County, so I am 2 hours from home. And I got a text message from somebody who isn't necessarily like a really close friend, kind of an acquaintance. He goes to my church. Like we're friends, but we don't hang out, that sort of thing. And he was asking if he could get a ride down to Oshkosh. And it'd be real easy for me to just be like, well, no, I'm not around. Sorry. But I caught myself. I shouldn't even say I caught myself. I noticed that like I approached that text message different than I would have in the past. Like I honestly felt for this guy and was trying to figure out a way that like, oh, do I know anybody in the Appleton area that could give this guy a ride down to Oshkosh? And so I consider that a win, even though from his perspective, I wasn't able to help him out.
Right.
I think that over time, like there are going to be definitely more positive outcomes from this.
Yeah, I can see that. There's a lot of value in thinking through how do I deliver a no in a good way. I do it with clients all the time. I kind of hate doing it with clients all the time, but it's a good thing to do it with clients all the time. So like, okay, I need to make sure that they know, one, that I'm trying to help them, two, I'm the wrong person to help them, and three, where they should go from there, which is exactly what my follow-up is trying to use the yes, no, yes every time a big decision needs a no. And it's something I have found is most important in my client relationships whenever I need to tell them no on a specific thing. Like take, for example, I have one in particular right now that wants, and I don't know why certain people do this. They want to dictate the way that I'm storing data for their plugin for, say, Discourse. And if they want that level of detail, I typically need to find a very strong way to say, no, I do this for a living. I know what I'm talking about. This is the way it should happen.
I'm a Discourse expert.
Yes, I am a professional at this. Please stop arguing with me on this. Unless you are one of the top data analysts in the world, you should not be arguing with me on this. And if you're one of the top data analysts in the world, you are likely not going to employ my services in this scenario. You would simply do it yourself. So let's say no here. So
right.
Those are entertaining conversations.
Yeah, I feel like if I was still doing client work, I would probably have a lot more opportunities to practice this stuff. But yep. I'm glad that I'm not.
I can pass them on to you if you want.
I'm good.
You could pose as my admin that says no.
I will pass, but thanks. I'd prefer not to, Joe.
Just there you go. All right, we've been alluding to our book for the day. Why don't you introduce it for us?
Sure. This is The Art of Thinking Clearly by Rolf Dobelli, and I probably slaughtered that name, and I apologize. But this is a book all about cognitive biases, and it's really laid out interestingly because every chapter, I think, is exactly 3 pages. I don't think I saw one that was longer, one that was short.
Right. They're like 2.5, 3 every single time.
Yep.
Yeah.
But there are 100 mini chapters, each one covering a different cognitive bias. And so in this episode, what we're going to do is something a little bit different. We're not going to try and encapsulate the thoughts of the entire book because it's impossible to do. We're also not going to go through all the cognitive biases.
We're extremely biased. Like everything is biased. I can't control anything.
Yep, exactly. So we're not going to go through all 99 of them either. We're going to pick some of our favorites, and then you've got a couple, or actually one specific talking point, which was something that I was thinking about the entire time also, is like, where is the line of the ethical use of these biases when it comes to selling and marketing? And that is maybe a niche discussion off of this general topic of cognitive biases, but given what we do for a living, I think it's very important.
Well, it was interesting to me that going through this, I work with clients and I work on my own projects, and 99% of the time that is all online business-ish. The 1% is cases where I'm helping someone set up like a point of sale system in their brick and mortar. So I could not help, every time a new bias was introduced, I could not help but see that bias being exploited in certain areas of business or online marketing in some form or another. It seems like almost every single one of these has a form of extortion of sorts put into it in order to get people to buy. And the question I have, and we can get into it either now or later, it doesn't matter to me, Mike, but I felt like it would be very easy to sell a lot of things if you employ like 5 or 6 of these in your online business. You could sell as much as you want every single day. Question is, should you do that? Personally, I feel like the answer is no. But at what point? Because it's almost impossible to market without doing something here. So what do you do?
Yeah, this is a very, very interesting question. And I'm sure that there's going to be people on both sides of this argument. So there was a book that I read a while back which kind of changed my opinion and perspective on this topic. And that is Influence by Robert Cialdini. Have you read that one?
I have not, but it's on my list.
Okay, so this is often referred to as the marketing Bible. And what it talks about is 7 specific marketing strategies which are wrapped up in these cognitive biases. And he explains how they work and then also how to combat them. And so he uses stories in that book of people who are trying to use these marketing tactics or cognitive biases against him and how he like spun them around. And I think that when it comes to these cognitive biases and the marketing strategies that you would use to either play off of these, what really the fine line here is in what are you actually promoting? What are you selling? If you are marketing junk, if you are marketing a pyramid scheme, which actually was referred to specifically in one of these cognitive biases, if you know that the thing that you are selling is not the thing that the person needs, then I think that, yeah, there's definitely a lot of opportunity to use these in a negative way. I think if you are honest, it is fine to use story to sell your product. You know, story bias is one of the biases. You don't want to manipulate people, and you don't want to play to their fears necessarily, but you want to give people an opportunity to buy the thing that you've created if you really think it is going to help them. And so I think obviously there's some gray area there between like what is a legit product and what is a junk product that you're just trying to sell because you want to make a bunch of money. But I think that is really the distinction between when this is okay and when it's not. Really, it comes down to, do you trust the person that you're buying from? If you trust the person that you're buying from, then the cognitive biases that play into this, that is, in my opinion, that's okay to a certain degree. They might be using different strategies, different tactics. That's okay if you trust that they really do have your best interests at heart. Like if you align with their core values, you can trust the end result of the product that they're selling. So like an example of this would be Apple's stance on privacy versus somebody like Google's stance on privacy. I will spend a bunch of money on Apple products because I align with the company's values and vision, and I believe them when they say that they're not going to sell my data, because that is important to me. Now, there are lots of other people who are like, I don't care. I got nothing to hide. Go ahead, sell my data as long as I get Gmail for free. Okay, that's fine. But you have to recognize that both of those products are being marketed using these cognitive biases, and that's going to taint how you view the company based on your values and your vision. So I personally don't like the fact that my mail is being read through. So when I see Google using those cognitive biases against me, I'm going to think, oh, those jerks, what the heck are they doing? But when I see Apple do it, it's not a big deal, if that makes sense.
Because your bias is towards their motivation. Like you're trusting them simply because you know that they have a core value of letting you keep your own data and not using it for their own purposes. So because you buy into that, it's okay if they do something that is either very similar to or at least along the same lines of what Google does. So you tend to be okay with that. I think I tend to fall into a lot of the same category there. The question is that, you know, if I look at how I market certain websites of my own, like even take like Bookworm, how do you want to market that? Well, we don't really market it at all. We just kind of let it grow on its own, and we let people share it with their friends and let it grow that way. We don't really do a lot of marketing per se. Like we tend to do the whole word of mouth thing, which it has kind of its own bias in it as well, because you're taking advantage of like the friendship side of things, letting story play into it. But at the same time, I would like it to grow more, of course. Like, who wouldn't, right? So, you know, if you want it to grow more, then what do you do about it? And that's something that I have been struggling with, specifically with my business as a whole. It's something I've talked about on Theoretical a number of times, and I'm working through over the next couple months and a week or so, and trying to figure out, well, what is the right way to market without exploiting some of these things? Because there's some of them, like you mentioned the story bias. I like telling stories about how something has helped me. Like, I like doing that. And I feel like that's a way for me to convey something to the folks who follow me so that they can see, this is what I struggle with, this is how I work through things, this is something I'm trying to nail down. But the trick comes in whenever I feel that the intent behind that story is to try to get a sale. I think part of this is, what's the purpose? Like, what's your underlying intent of said marketing strategy? Which is darn near impossible to drag out of somebody else. Like, you can never nail down what someone else's intent is, but you can see what their actions are and try to extrapolate out to it. But you have to be careful with that, because there's a bias that comes with that one as well. So this is kind of the slippery slope of, okay, well, this bias and that bias, and if I try to do this, well, then what about that? It can get to be a bit fatalistic almost, where there's not an answer here. So just do nothing, which I think I have fallen into even that trap in the past.
Yeah, I don't think you can judge other people's motives necessarily, but you can judge the thing that they are trying to sell. And you can say that, you know, you're selling this thing for X amount of dollars. It's really only worth this amount of dollars because of X. And obviously, even the value judgments are going to be different, but there's definitely going to be times where you can identify that the product that is being sold or marketed isn't being sold or marketed honestly. And so it really comes down to the integrity and the character of the marketer, in my opinion. We used Apple and Google as an example, but you mentioned the online space. Like, there's a lot of people selling stuff in the online space, and I think that whether you trust the person or not really comes down to, what does the person stand for, and is it in line with your core values, which is probably one of these cognitive biases to begin with. But I think that there are definitely certain things that you can just say, like, yeah, that's really not worth it. That is a scam in essence. But I do think that those are few and far between, and I also think that from like the Joe Bulig perspective, and you're talking about how do I want Bookworm to grow, I want my business to grow, but I also don't want to be a sleazy marketer guy. I don't think that there is anything wrong with being marketer guy. You don't have to be sleazy, but you can definitely tell stories, and you can frame. Framing is another one of these cognitive biases. Like, you can frame your offering in a positive way. There's nothing immoral about that. And in fact, when you do that, it opens the door for you to actually help people. I think the intention is really important. Like, if you are in the productivity space, you are either capitalizing on the audience and you're just trying to make a quick buck, or you are honestly trying to help people do more with what they have been given and do the right things. Maybe not even do more, but make sure that what they're doing is the right things. And I think there's a lot of people in this space who that is their intention. They do want to help people. And I think that comes through in how you market. It's almost like you can, in my opinion anyways, like you can kind of smell a phony if you do any amount of research or digging. Like, you can see pretty quickly when something is fake. You go on Amazon and you search for something and you get the real product at $300 and you get all the knockoffs at $15. Like, you know that those aren't going to meet your needs.
Right. And I think there's something to that, because so many of these online businesses, they want to use a lot of these tactics. Like, they want to frame things in a certain way, even though they don't necessarily, like, it's a sales thing. It's not a integrity thing. If you get the difference between those two in that case, because they're trying to get a sale as opposed to trying to accomplish something for that person. I think this is where, like, personally, and I can see this because I'm me, this is even a bias, but I feel like whenever I'm trying to do some of this marketing and I'm trying to share certain things, I'm genuinely trying to find a way to get things out to people because I think it can help them. Like, just hearing the struggles that I'm going through, because this is kind of my take on the productivity space, is trying to share what I'm going through and what I'm struggling through, the things I'm working through from an app or a services standpoint. I feel like that's a way to help people with it, because they can see my way of working through it. And if they can understand my mindset on how I've got to where I'm at, my hope is that they can take that and then grow from it and nail their own system down using that as a base. And that's okay, I think, to try to genuinely find a way to share your own story so that it helps other people work through their own. I think it's also very easy to use that and say that I'm going to do this because it's a good way to sell and people tend to trust you if you do this. It's very easy to come across that way. Like, some people, I'm sure, will interpret what I'm doing in that way, even though that is far from my intent. And that's not what I'm doing. I'm trying the best I can to show that I'm genuine in that method. And I think you would be the same, Mike. You love to help people with their apps, with their tools, with their time, email. I mean, you love helping people in the same way. I think you would say the same. You genuinely love helping people. The trick is, how do you convey that without without crossing these lines, whatever those lines are?
Right. Well, I think that a big key to this is in what sort of feedback people give you after you've offered the assistance or they've gone through the product. So at Agent Efficiency, we're implementing a Net Promoter Score system. And that is basically, after you've gone through the product, what do you think of it? Did it help you? Did it not help you? And then if it didn't help you, like, if you're honest, you're going to try to fix that so that it can actually help the person. In fact, if you implement NPS the right way, you don't give up on that person until you've closed that loop and they are happy. And I think that if you actually track, what do people think of the product itself? And this is not the trolls and the haters who are sending you emails saying that you should kill yourself, because I know that you get those.
You want some?
No, that's okay. Those people you don't want to try to win over. There's always going to be people who take issue with how you are promoting your product, unless you don't promote your product, and then they win. But if you are promoting it and your product is good, then if people go through the process and they go through your product, like, those testimonials, in essence, like, those should be generated automatically as long as you follow up with the person. I mean, they're not always going to come out and say, yeah, this was great, this changed my life. But if you give them the opportunity to, that can give you a baseline on whether you are actually helping people or you've transitioned into sleazy marketing guy. because I think the key there is, what do you do with that negative feedback? Do you actually change? Do you try to improve it? Or you just say, well, I got your money already, so I don't care.
Yeah, I think that's tricky. Kind of a side note on the troll thing. I talked to somebody at MacStock about trolls as a side conversation and got this really cool idea on how to respond to them. This person told me that he likes to send a lorem ipsum to trolls. So he gets a troll telling him his product is junk. And he has, I have, as a web developer, I've got these text expander snippets that have lorems into them. And for those of you who don't know, a lorem ipsum is essentially, it's Latin text and it's just nonsense to us. So it's just this long text. It's just this long text that has a way of just filling in paragraphs. It's just a filler is all it is. It doesn't mean anything. There's nothing in it. Like, it's not meant to be read. It just fills space. And this guy likes to send those to trolls, and they get so confused because they think you buried something in there for them to read, and they pour through it, and they sometimes find patterns that don't exist, which is another bias that's in here. It's very entertaining to get some of their replies. Now, he did tell me that you have to be careful with that because they will send you a whole bunch of emails and follow-up trying to figure out what you were telling them, so you have to be okay with that.
Interesting. Yeah, I can see where that would just drive some people nuts and why you might want to do that. But I think ultimately, the long term, that maybe isn't helping.
No, it's not at all. It's purely entertainment value at that point. So it's not something I plan to do. So for a while, I was just sending blank emails to them, which confused them as well. Like, wait, did he mean to send a blank email? What, did he forget to type it in? Like, it really confused them, but it just meant more email. So I stopped doing that.
Do you want to talk about some of the biases themselves? I mean, we talked a lot about them generally, but maybe diving into some specific ones.
I mean, we've talked around this ethical use of them thing. We're not going to come up with an answer here. I think if you could nail down an answer, a lot of people would be excited and then they would exploit your answer to get something. So I don't think you're going to nail. I think it's going to be something that we each have to nail down how we want to go about doing marketing in an honest and integrity filled way so that people are genuinely excited about the things we're creating and they're happy with the way that we sold them on it. So I don't think we need to go over that anymore. So I'm good with jumping into the next one, which is 3 biases to which we're most susceptible. So that means we get to talk about some of these, Mike.
Picking 3 out of these 99 is going to be maybe pretty difficult, but we'll give it a shot.
That's why I wrote down that we're most susceptible to, not 3 that we're susceptible to, because I felt like I was susceptible to like all of them in some way, which is terrible.
I think Rolf Dobelli would agree that these all come into play at some point. But yeah, let's dive in here. Do you have a clear winner?
I don't have a clear winner. I've got 3 written down. How about this? We'll just alternate, go back and forth. So one of them that I know that I'm susceptible to, I don't have, like, I didn't rank these, but one of them I wrote down is what's called the gambler's fallacy. So it's the concept that if something is happening repetitively, and the example that he gave in the book was, what was the game? I'm terrible at gamblers' games.
Roulette, I think.
Was it roulette?
Pretty sure, because it had been a certain color so many times in a row, so people kept betting on the other color thinking, it's going to be the other color this time, and it never was.
Right, so they're at a roulette table, and the ball kept landing on black, and it landed 20 times in a row on black, and people started betting on red like crazy because it has to eventually go red, and a lot of people lost millions of dollars on betting on red, and it kept landing on black, and it didn't actually go to red until the 27th spin. So at that point, there was a lot of money on the table, and a lot of people went bankrupt. So the concept there is that if something is happening repeatedly, you tend to expect the opposite to happen very quickly or right away, because it can't just keep going in that line forever. So, in that particular case, every single roll, it has a 50-50 chance of black over red. Even though it's been 20 times on black, it's still 50-50 on roll 21. But we tend to think that, oh no, it has to be like 90-10. It's going to land on red because it's been black so many times. No, it doesn't actually matter. You know, it doesn't, the probability doesn't work out. It's still 50-50 every single time. We just don't like to think that way. And this is something that I know I fall into. I know there have been cases where I've had a handful of rough client projects. Surely the next one's going to be good because I've had so many bad ones. It has to balance out sometime. Oh, no, it doesn't. It doesn't actually work that way. So this is one that I know I need to make myself familiar with and be okay not falling into.
Yeah, and this is interesting because it basically works against another cognitive bias, which is the regression to mean error. And he used the example there of somebody who their back pain went away after they visited a chiropractor, or their golf game got better after they visited a professional. And his point with the regression to mean is that it would have improved on its own because these things tend to average out. But with the gambler's fallacy, that doesn't work because there is no balancing force in the universe. So like when you're playing roulette or when you're flipping a coin, for example, there's nothing that says it has to be this a bunch of times in a row in order to make this balanced, like for example, a system like the weather. And this was really, really interesting because I this was on my list too. So I'll have to pick a different one now. But I know that I've fallen into this where you see something happen a bunch of times in a row and you're like, oh, well, it's probably going to be the other one now. But what you just said is that like if you flip a coin 10 times and it's heads 10 times in a row, the next time, and it's still got that 50% chance of being heads, 50% chance of being tails. That kind of boggles my mind. It's not the way my mind works. So yeah, I definitely believe that I am susceptible to this one as well.
Yeah, and because our mind doesn't work that way, we just expect, like, the probability of it happening that many times in a row has to be different than 50-50 on the next roll. Like, it just has to. Like, it's a mathematical thing, but it's not. It's right. Purely 50-50. Okay. So this one was on your list too. So does that mean I have to go again?
No, I'll pick one.
Okay, you go next.
Okay, so this one I've known about for a really long time. I still find myself falling for this, though, and that is the planning fallacy, where we tend to underestimate how long projects are going to take. And the point behind this one is that there really is no learning curve for us when it comes to planning, which, again, seems counterintuitive. Seems like we should be able to learn that, last time I did this project, it took this many hours. So next time I do this project, it's going to take that many hours. It's not going to be less than that because things are never going to go exactly the way that they're supposed to. But I am ashamed to admit that I fall for this more often than I probably should. The example that they use here I thought was really interesting. That's the Sydney Opera House, which was built in 1957. And they projected that this was going to be done in 1963 for $7 million. It was actually completed in 1973, and the total cost was $102 million.
Ooh.
So even people who do this like for a living, they suck at this as well.
Makes me feel a little better.
Yep.
Yeah, I know that it's something that, and let's go task management here. I have played around with the estimated time thing in OmniFocus a few times, and I've dabbled with it even here recently, trying to figure out if I could find a way to calculate how much time I'm spending on certain things, or trying to get a feel for how much I can do in a day. But it's so hard to nail down how much time something's going to take. My typical method of doing that is knowing that I think something's going to take me 15 minutes, so I set aside 45 for it. Like, that's the best way I can do it. But even then, sometimes I'm off. But yeah, I know that I'm terrible at this as well.
Yeah, actually, this is interesting. We just had a Scrum meeting this week for Asian Efficiency, and Marmel just got back from Scrum leaders training. I forget exactly what it was, but one of the things that they said was you do they call it planning poker, where you kind of identify how many story points something is going to be, and then you bump it up one. So if you were to say, like, this is going to be, and the way that the story points work in Scrum, it's the Fibonacci number sequence. So the number of story points is equal to the sum of the previous two. So it goes 1, then 2, then 3, because 3 is the sum of 1 plus 2. But then the next one is 5 because it's 3 plus 2. The next one is 8, 5 plus 3, 13, 21, whatever. So that means that if the agent efficiency team is planning our sprint and we say this issue is going to take 13 story points, everybody agree? Yes. We don't leave it at 13. We bump it up to 21, which is actually a much, much larger estimate.
Right. Interesting. Yeah. I've just, it makes a lot of sense to bump things up from where you think they should be. All right. So another one on my list here of ones that I know I'm susceptible to is the self-serving bias. So essentially, if something goes well, say I build a new product, I create a new website, I launch said website, and it's a success, I will attribute that success to my own professional prowess and how great I am at building websites. I will say that that's something I did. If it goes badly, I tend to assume that it's because I hit the timing wrong or the technology was not working the way it should. It's something external. It's not my fault. So I like to take credit for the successes and pass the blame to the failures to something else. Not usually to other people, usually to other circumstances in my case, but I like to make sure that things are self-serving. And whenever I read this about the self-serving bias, I wanted to stop reading. It's like, I don't want to know about this because I know I do this.
Yeah, there's a lot of these are kind of related, and the self-serving bias. Basically, we attribute success to ourselves and failure to to other people. I definitely could see that one applying to myself as well. But it wasn't one of my top 3, so you didn't steal it this time.
Okay, good.
All right, I'm having trouble picking these. Man, there's so many. Let's say availability bias, where the availability bias is where we create a picture of the world using the examples that most easily come to mind. So I am aware of this, and I know that I have done this, but I've also taken steps to overcome this, I believe, and that's one of the reasons, in my opinion, why Bookworm is so important, because when we read these different books, we hear these different stories, we get these different perspectives. It causes us to rethink and reevaluate what we quote unquote know. So one of the examples of the availability bias that they use in the book is the phrase, smoking can't be bad for you because my grandma smokes every day and she lived to be 100. Okay, that's one data point. But when you don't really understand the information that is available on a particular topic, then you focus on that one data point and you're like, oh, it's not so bad. It can cause you to overestimate, for example, the chances of a plane or a car crash, or you underestimate the chances of diabetes or cancer. Most people are terrified. Well, I shouldn't say most people. There are a lot of people who are terrified of getting on an airplane because they don't have the control over the outcome. But it's actually much, much safer than even getting in a car. Likewise, a lot of people don't think about their life or their mortality, I guess. Don't want to make this a downer of an episode, but like it is a very real possibility that you could end up getting one of these diseases. And in fact, it's much higher than you getting in a plane crash. But that's where people's minds go if they have this availability bias, because we prefer wrong information to no information. Ignorance is not bliss. And that's why, like I mentioned, Bookworm, the benefit of reading these books for me is that it gives me a bigger mental toolbox, even if I don't create these really elaborate notes or mind maps, which for this one, actually, it's pretty huge. But
I bet.
Even if I don't go back and reread those things, even if I don't internalize those things where like I can spit back these statistics, they do impact my overall view of a particular subject. And it becomes a more informed point of view. And I know we've talked about this before, but I'm okay with the subconscious effect that has on my worldview without having to know all of the specific points or all the specific ways that it has benefited me. Does that make sense?
It does.
Okay.
It does. It's very similar to And I'll get into this one as far as one of them that fascinates us. I'll get into that one here in a minute. But survivorship, I'll just table that one. We'll come back to that one here in a minute. The last one on my list because we've been through your three now. Right?
Two.
You're most susceptible.
Two. You started.
Right, but you did the gambler's fallacy on top of me.
True. I do have one more I want to mention because this is one that I definitely fall for.
Okay. All right. So you go ahead with that one.
Okay. So my third one then is overthinking.
What? You overthink things, Mike?
Oh yeah, all the time. And this is sort of related to the ambiguity aversion because I want to know things. The things that I don't know freak me out. But overthinking, exactly what it sounds like. You think too much and you cut off your mind from the wisdom of your feelings. The way that he framed this was really, really interesting because we tend to think, and myself included, we tend to think of emotions as bad things, like the flight or fight response. In the productivity space, we talk about that and say, like, you need to escape that because those emotional decisions, that's actually going to lead to bad decisions. You need to see the problem the right way. Well, the way he framed it in this book, the emotions that form in your brain, they form the same way that the rational thoughts do, and they're merely a different form of information. So if you're making a decision based on collecting all of the information and making the best decision, you need to weigh that stuff. And sometimes it needs to be weighed more than the facts and the data that you collect. And that's where I believe I fall into the overthinking thing is I tend to do tons and tons of research. Give you an example. Whenever I have to book my own flights, I sit there and I look at flights for like 2 or 3 hours and I'm stressed out because I'm like, I can't find the flight I want. You know, all of them leave at like 6 a.m. I got to be at the airport at 4. Like, I don't want to do that. And I've started working with an executive assistant, and that's one of the things that she does for me is she books my flights whenever I need them, and she'll just go and she'll find them, and she's much better at it than I am, and she'll show me the flights and be like, well, no, I prefer not to leave, you know, or this layover right here, this is too short. I got to change planes. I'm gonna have to run across Chicago, whatever. Like, that's a big load off of my brain. I don't have to think about that stuff. And when she presents the flights to me, I can look at it and I can use my gut reaction, my initial feeling on the thing. Like, yes, this is good. No, it is bad. Instead of having to comb through all of the thousands of flight options that are available that day. And that really gets into like the very end of this, which we can talk a little bit about it, but just real briefly, what he says is that there's a time to recognize all these cognitive biases and overcome them. And there's also a time when the decision really doesn't matter that much to go with your gut and to go with those emotional responses, because to go through the 99-point checklist for every decision you make, including like, where do you want to go out to eat? That's ridiculous.
Yes, to all the things. Yeah, there's a lot there, but I'm with you on, you know, if you've got too many things available to you, or you've got too many options, which is another thing in here. You know, if you've got too much to choose from, it can be overwhelming and it gets hard to actually make a decision. This is why a lot of cases, like if my wife and I are going to go out for dinner or something, it's not uncommon for me to pick 2 or 3 options and then let her pick from that. Because I can typically get it whittled down fairly quickly, and she's pretty good at making that final decision. So I just know that sometimes this is better for us to just work in that way. Otherwise, it gets to be kind of a mess and takes forever. I get you.
I like that strategy. I may have to employ that.
Or work it the other way around. Let her filter it and you pick the final, depending on how you do it. The last one on my list of ones I'm susceptible to, inability to close doors. And I've gotten better at this one, but essentially it is, you think that everything just either needs a little more time or that the next thing that's brought up is potentially the big thing. So in the world of online stuff, I am currently a part of 3 podcasts. I've got at least 2 fairly substantial website builds that I'm going through right now that could become businesses. And then I've got all my client stuff. So I've got a ton of things going on. And that's just the work I do for my own business. There's also the stuff I do at the church. There's also another commercial contractor client that I have. Like there's a lot of these things that I do that can very quickly overwhelm my time. So I tend to see opportunities and I want to say yes to them, but that quickly leads me to having too many projects going on. Thus, we come back to Joe needs to use yes, no, yes more often and continue saying no to things. So I am in a place now where I know that I can maintain what I'm currently doing. I don't need to kill any of these things that I'm working on right now, but I sure need to stop saying yes to anything new for certain. So I'm up against a brick wall on this one right now, Mike. So I have to start saying no more often.
Nice. Do you want to, we could definitely keep going on the ones that we're susceptible to, but there's a couple that I just wanted to talk about because they were really interesting to me. So what do you want to do? You want to keep talking about those or talk about the ones that fascinate us?
Yeah, I've got 3 that I'm fascinated by, so I'll let you start this round.
Okay. So I'll start with one that I am scared I am susceptible to, and that is the chauffeur knowledge. He uses the story of this world-renowned speaker, and he goes and he gives all these talks, and the chauffeur has heard the talk over and over and over again. So he floats this idea one time. He's like, hey, I know your talk. Why don't you let me give it? And the expert's like, yeah, that sounds interesting. And then he gets up and he gives the talk, and somebody asks a question that he can't answer. And he says, that is such a simple question. I'm going to let my chauffeur answer it. And then he calls on the quote unquote chauffeur, which is actually the expert, to come on and take over. But the point of this story is that what you can recite doesn't necessarily mean that you know. True experts recognize the limits of what they know and what they don't know. And he talks about the circle of confidence. What lies inside your circle of confidence, you kind of understand intuitively. What lies outside, you may only partially understand. So one of the things that I do for Asian Efficiency is I host the Productivity Show podcast, and I go on and I do research every single week for a productivity topic. And I am scared that I am a poser, that I am a chauffeur, because even though I live in this space, I eat and breathe this stuff, I am scared that I am spouting off information that I have not fully internalized and really understand. I guess I'm a little bit scared that I am missing the real point of some of this stuff, and I do not want to come across as not being authentic or genuine. And I want to make sure that the stuff that I do give as advice, it is stuff that I know works. I don't want to mislead anybody, which is why I try to talk about my own personal experience as much as possible, because it's hard to dispute that, this is what I did. This is the result that I got. You can't really argue that. But if you're trying to spout off something else that you've gotten from somebody else and hey, you should totally do this, then that's dangerous, I think.
This one was on my list too, so you took this one from me as well. But I have this on here because of, 1, it's fascinating to me. 2, I am with you in that I don't want to fall into this one. So I'm aware that it would be very easy for me to, especially in the productivity space, we talk about this all the time. And we went into this earlier with the ethical use bit, but I know that it would be very easy for me to say, here's what you should do, and here's how this should work, and this is what everybody recommends, and spout it off as if I am very familiar with it and it's something I do all the time. Now, in some cases, that's true. I do the exact thing, and I try to explain the exact process that I go through on that. There's a lot of cases where I just suck at it and I'm terrible at this thing, and I do the best I can to explain that because I don't want people to think I'm 100% expert in this. I'm just maybe a step ahead of some folks that follow me, and that's exactly where I need to be. So I'm still struggling through all this, and this is exactly why I brought up the ethical thing, because I don't want that. I don't want to get to a point where people have that correlation of thinking, oh, he's just spouting off stuff he's learned elsewhere. I don't want to do that. So I have a pretty strong knee-jerk reaction to folks that I feel like are doing that and don't want to go there.
Yep, totally agree.
So I'm with you on that one. One of the others that I have, and I mentioned this earlier, is the survivorship bias, which is the first bias he mentions in the book. And I thought it was very interesting, and it's something that I see a lot of in especially entrepreneurs, because they will see someone who did a thing and it's highly successful and people want to emulate it. So one example that I would give on this is the Lore podcast. So Aaron Mahnke runs that. It's crazy how many people are now starting to do things very similar to him and his podcast. They see the thing he's doing. They're trying to emulate that. He made it big. Surely I can make it big too if I simply do what he's doing. The example in the book was rock stars. There was a guy who he was seeing all these successful rock stars. I could be a rock star. Well, what you're not seeing is all the failures and all the people who didn't make it. So the title of that chapter is Why You Should Visit Cemeteries. That way you can see all the people who didn't make it and all the people who didn't become a overnight success in that case, quote unquote overnight. But it's something that I see a number of people trying to do. I've even helped some people try to get businesses off the ground that are kind of borderline this, because they feel like they see something, they want to emulate another site, they want to follow the pattern of a bigger successful business. And although that's a good thing to do in some cases, you don't want to copy them verbatim. It's going to go badly because they've been successful. That's them. They're being true to themselves. You're not in that case. So it can be kind of dangerous to fall down that slope. But just be aware that people tend to do this. And I'm fascinated by it because I don't struggle with this one at all, because I know there's a lot of failures and you have to get through some of those failures to get to the success. And I know that a lot of people have just had to completely give up the thing that they had as a dream because it didn't work out for them, because they didn't have X, Y, and Z that made it possible. So I see this. So I try to help people see it, but I'm not one that struggles with, oh, they made it big, I can do it too. Like, I don't typically go that route.
Yeah, this is interesting because I think it touches on another cognitive bias, which is exponential growth, because people see the success of Lore and they view it as overnight success. But in my opinion, suddenly never comes suddenly. I was actually on the Homework podcast, which Aaron Mahnke hosted with Dave Kalo before Lore became big.
Right.
And like, I remember when I recorded him with them, he had mentioned that this was kind of a side project that he was doing, and he had just launched. I think at that time he had just been on Systematic with Brett Terpstra and talked about it, but it really hadn't taken off yet. I thought it was cool, but he was still pretty excited about it, and it was still pretty new. Not saying that he's not excited about it now, but like when you start something new, you're usually like super excited about it because you have no idea where it could actually go. And in this particular instance, it ended up taking off. Even if these copycats had something a little bit unique about their story, it's going to take a long time before they would achieve the success that Aaron has, because Aaron did this for a long time. It was essentially a passion project, and that term gets thrown around a lot, and I think it kind of has a negative connotation, but it's something that he was doing for fun before it was going to pay all of his bills and lead to the lifestyle that he now has. And that's what makes it successful. The exponential growth, that's the concept of we don't understand exponential math as well as we understand linear math. We can add things, but we don't multiply things very well. And the story he uses there is like the penny doubled every day. That results in over $5 million. And most people, you say, you want a penny doubled every day or $1,000 for 30 days. So you have $30,000 at the end of the 30 days. A lot of people, without doing the math, just thinking about it, they take the $30,000. But the penny doubled, the exponential growth, that's the key to growing. That's the key to success. And you don't see that when you just look at the result. When you just look at Lore and you'd be like, oh, I could do that. Well, you could, but you won't. You're going to give up long before Aaron did, because you're not seeing that exponential growth yet.
You're also not seeing all the difficulties that he has to deal with on that.
Exactly.
So you don't know the backstory.
Yeah, if you don't really have the why to get you through that initial, that before the hockey stick growth, you won't make it. There is going to be, like you said, a lot of trials to overcome. There's going to be a lot of adversity you're going to have to overcome, but it can be worth it in the end. But you have to have your own reason for it. You can't just be like, oh, I want to copy this guy over there. Like, that is not going to be enough to see you through.
So what else fascinates you?
So many. Winner's curse. This is interesting because if you think about any sort of auction, specifically the example that comes to mind for me is free agency for sports. The winner of the auction often turns out to be the loser because by definition of the auction, they are willing to pay more than anybody else. So they are paying above market value. And as we're recording this, kind of the NBA free agency, when it has been going on the last month or so, and there's people who are signing like $200 million contracts. And you just see that stuff and you're just like, wow, that is ridiculous on one front, because it is a lot of money. But that's a separate discussion. I mean, if the market is going to pay that, then more power to you. But even if you understand the market and you say that, yeah, that salary, like that, the money is justified, generally speaking, what I've noticed is that you find out that this certain player signed for this much money and you're like, what? Like, right. They're not a superstar. How did they get that much money? And it's because of this winner's curse. And this can obviously play out in a lot of different arenas. But that's the one that I kind of see in the news. But I mean, eBay auctions, whatever, like there's a lot of different ways that this could manifest. And I think it's interesting to see that any sort of auction, like, you are going to be overpaying.
Yes, that's the whole purpose of that thing. Like, the way an auction works is designed to raise the price as high as you can. Yeah,
you basically can't win with an auction style.
Right. Unless there's no one else there that's interested in it, you know what it's worth, and you don't pay a penny more. Unless you come in it that way, and you just get lucky that no one else is there, it's never going to work out well.
Yeah, but see, that's the thing I think is interesting about this, is that's a very dangerous assumption to make, is like, oh, look, I discovered this thing and there's so many other people out there that would pay more for this, but they don't know about it. Right. Especially in today's society, like, people know about it.
Yeah, it's kind of the way it works. The last one here on my list of those that fascinate me, and I shouldn't say it's the last one that fascinates me because a ton of these fascinate me, but the one that I wrote down anyway is anchoring. And you see this a lot with pricing strategies, especially when prices are up for negotiation, because someone will drop a number and that sets the baseline by which all other numbers are judged. So if you think about walking into, say, a car dealership and you see $10,000 on a car, you're probably more apt to spend, say, $9,000 on it or $9,500 because your baseline was $10,000. But if you do some more digging, you may find out that car is worth $6,000. But because they had the baseline so high, they anchored it so high, you tend to not go down that far when you're talking about it. And you see this a lot of times. It doesn't have to be the same thing. Even if you're talking about something completely unrelated, like, let's talk about, say, consulting prices. I'm going to charge, say, $1,000, $1,500 for an hour of my time to talk through something. Or we could spend $400 on this whole thing, like this other, say, video course of sorts. These are things that Mike and I work on quite a bit, and I'm just throwing numbers out there. I'm not pulling anything out specifically, but if you use that baseline as the $1,500, $400 seems crazy cheap. So of course, let's jump in and buy that. Even though it's 2 videos and they're both 30 seconds long, it's not worth $400. So that doesn't add up. Like, that's not what you should spend on that, but people would do it because of how it's anchored.
Yep.
There you go.
Yeah. I really like the anchoring bias as well. And this is one of those ones that is used in marketing all the time. And really, this is why you really have to trust the person who is marketing to you, because if they say this thing is worth $10,000 and then you buy the one that's worth $9,500, like, you have to really believe them when they say this is worth $10,000. That's where in the past, like, I've seen, you go to anywhere, like even I'll choose something like Slack. And you go to sign up for Slack and you see the different plans that are available. There's like the free, the basic, and the enterprise or something like that. Like they're anchoring off of the enterprise and you work backwards and you find the one in the middle. And Slack is an awesome service. I love it. We use it with Agent Efficiency. We use it a couple other teams that I'm involved with. I know a lot of people. I haven't personally had to pay for any of the premium features because of the way that we use it, but I know a lot of people who do. Like they trust the company, but that anchoring bias, like that's not a bad thing in Slack's case because they're providing the different options. But any sort of web service that you go to, they'll use the same sort of thing. And if you just go there cold and you have no idea who it is or what the service is all about, that's where you really have to be aware of that type of stuff. And so, like you mentioned, like buying a car, for example, really important who you buy your car from. You don't want to buy it from the sleazy car salesman who is going to sell you a lemon. But if you really trust the person that you're buying from, and they say this one's worth $10,000, this one's worth $9,500, it doesn't have this or this, like you can use the anchoring bias, and it doesn't have to be a negative thing.
Yes, I'm with you. Make sure you
trust them. A little bit of a tangent. Sorry.
That's all right. I'm with you. We see this stuff a lot.
All right, so there's two I want to call out. The one I want to call it just because it's appropriate for our audience is the Zeigarnik effect, which I think maybe we've even mentioned on this podcast before. This was interesting because he talks about David Allen specifically, and I got more about the science behind David Allen's approach from the 3 pages here than the end of the Getting Things Done book, I think. But he talks about how we keep uncompleted things in our head and we clear them when they are finished. But what's interesting about this is that those outstanding tasks only gnaw at us until we know how we're going to deal with them. And that's why task managers are so important. Okay, so that one I think is interesting from a productivity perspective. But the one that I have an action item for is the news illusion, where we are incredibly well informed, yet we know incredibly little. Especially now, I think with the current state of news, you get very biased information no matter what side you associate with. And there's a book by Simon Sinek where he kind of explains why this is the case, called Leaders Eat Last, I believe. And he talks about some of the regulations that were passed, and basically when news companies didn't have as strict guidelines on presenting different sides of the story, you got people who sensationalized one side of the story because it resulted in higher ratings, and you find yourself in the situation we are today. But really the thing that I took away from this is that we don't need all of that news. We don't need to know everything that is going on because it doesn't have any positive benefit. And so one of my takeaways here is no news except for tech news. And that's just because I find it interesting and I want to know about that sort of stuff. It has a direct application to a lot of the work that I do, but I don't need to necessarily go on to CNN or Fox News or MSNBC or any of those other stations that just find out what's going on in the world. I've often told people, and this is not something that I've really firmly internalized, but I use Twitter fairly often. That's really the only social media network I'm on. And I like to look at the trends every once in a while because I feel like that gives you a pretty accurate view of what people think about what is going on in the world, as opposed to it being colored or tainted by one side or the other. And so I guess this was justification for me to use Twitter as my news, since I'm already there, and not feel like I'm missing out because I don't subscribe to a quote unquote real news source.
I don't like the news at all. I have avoided it for a while because of course there's the confirmation bias that comes in. You're only going to listen to the one that talks about the things that you like and in the way that you like them. But at the same time, ratings go up if negative things are talked about.
Exactly.
As opposed to positive. So every time I come away from watching the news, which the only time I really watch the news is when I am somehow stuck in front of a TV at, say, a hotel trying to eat breakfast and they've got the news on. That's about the only time I really watch the news, which is awesome. But it's something that I know if I spend time watching the news, I only have to watch it for about 5 or 6 minutes, and they've like jumped through like 7 stories in that amount of time, and I just feel like the world is going to collapse because of what they're presenting. It doesn't matter what it is, what station it is, it seems to always be the same.
Yep, definitely agree.
All right, so how do you overcome this stuff? Do you overcome it? I think you alluded to this earlier, of being aware of them, but being okay not worrying about them in some cases. And I think there's a lot of value in that, because if you're trying to overcome all of these, how many are in here, Mike? What was the number? It was like 100.
I believe there were 99 of them. And so that's a pretty big checklist.
See, he should have come up with one more. But biases against biases, maybe. But I feel like if you're trying to overcome these things, like, it's just not going to happen. Like, you're not going to overcome all of them. I think over time you can slowly build up resolve against certain ones and know which ones you're susceptible to and find ways to overcome those. There's probably some value in doing that. I know that from us reading so many books and in such short time frames, you tend to hear about certain ones on occasion that get talked about in more detail. I know going through this, there was probably 6 or 7 of them that I know we've talked about in other books. And they're things that I feel like I've been working to overcome as it is. So I think there's some value in reading through this and just seeing what they are and knowing that you're going to have to try to beat some of them, and then just building that over time. I don't think you're going to just sit down and say, I'm going to beat this one today. Like, it's not going to work that way.
Right. Actually, when I was reading this, I was thinking about the decision-making framework from Decisive, the RAP format. You know, widen your options, reality test your assumptions, attain distance, and prepare to be wrong. And the 4 specific villains of decision-making that they address in that book, a couple of them are cognitive biases. So it's addressing them specifically. And as I was reading this, I was thinking back to that. And that's a great framework, but it's assuming that these are the cognitive biases that impact you or you're most susceptible to. And so I think there's some value in identifying where your weaknesses are. The strategy to overcome them, I kind of alluded to this, but he's got in the epilogue the strategy. And he starts it off by saying that just because you've read through these doesn't mean that you're not going to struggle with them anymore. He admits that he struggles with them. Kind of the way that he attacks this is that he uses he recognizes these cognitive biases and tries to overcome them when he's making a really important decision. But the trivial stuff, the day-to-day stuff, he's fine letting his emotions handle that, because if you were to employ a framework for every single decision that you make, the average person makes 35,000 decisions a day. So if you're going to go through a 99-point checklist for every one of those 35,000 decisions, you won't even get through all 35,000. You won't actually do anything, and you'll be exhausted. So the efficiency mechanism is where you do allow your emotions to make some of the decisions, and you don't worry about the fact that these cognitive biases may come into play when you're choosing which restaurant you're going to go out to eat at, or what you're going to wear in the morning. You know, you're not going to go through, the overconfidence effect is kicking in here as I'm choosing which shirt to wear. Like, it doesn't matter.
Just run with it.
Yeah. And so I think everybody's got to find their own balance with this. But basically, I think it's the knowledge of these things, that they exist, that is beneficial. Going through all 99 of these and not being able to recite all 99 of these, not having them all written down in a book, even in my notes, which I have this huge mind node, I did not write down every single one. I wrote down most of them, what they were, and the big takeaways to me, like what spoke to me as I read through it. But you don't need to recognize every single decision that you make, that all of this stuff is coming into play. You just need to know what are the ways that you could fail when you really do need to make a good, important decision. And then what are the steps that you personally should take in order to overcome that? And I think that's where this book offers a lot of value. He doesn't give specific strategies for every single one of these, but in the words of G.I. Joe, now you know, and knowing is half the battle.
Way to go, G.I. Joe. So for action items here, one of the things that the only thing I wrote down here, because so much of this is just be aware of this, which that's a lot of books. It seems like, okay, just use this as knowledge when you're making decisions and talking in the future. But in this case, the one that I wrote down specifically here is working through my marketing strategies online. And we talked about this a lot earlier. It's something I've been struggling with. I'm working through it on theoretical to a point. And it's something I've kind of been painfully aware of it lately. And I say painfully aware very intentionally. I do that because it has literally caused pain to my brain at times. So like, okay, I need to figure this out. What is it I want to do? Because I want to grow so many of these things online that I'm doing, but I don't want to do that in a scammy way, I guess would be the way to say that. So I'm just trying to nail down what is it I'm okay with? What is it that I like to do? And how do I find a good way to do that? That's what I got.
Yeah, makes sense. The action items that I had, one of them I talked about already, that is the no news except tech news, just because I find that specifically interesting and that's not going to depress me. The other one, I wrote it down here as know when to hold them and when to fold them. The source being the epilogue, and just recognizing what are the decisions that I should be considering my cognitive biases. For example, if I were going to change careers, take a different job, whatever, like that's the big decisions, like that, where I want to move to, that sort of thing. Like that's where I want to recognize that this stuff is actually coming into play. And then recognizing when not to consider the cognitive biases. For example, when booking a flight, choosing a restaurant, whatever, recognize that, I don't need to collect all of the information. I can just offload this. I can make the emotional decision and it's going to be fine.
And you have to be okay with that.
Yep. So I guess the takeaway from that, if you were going to try to hold me accountable to this, is did I make any stupid decisions take much longer than they needed to be?
Okay. I will ask you that question next time, Mike.
Okay.
So author's style, I like kind of the rapid fire of this one. In a lot of cases, I don't like that. But he spells it out in the intro that I'm not going to explain how to beat these things. I'm just going to share with you this list that I have collected over time. And he does a very good job of giving you tons and tons of examples. There are hundreds of examples in this thing. And I think there's like 2 or 3 examples per cognitive bias. And when you think about them being 2.5, 3 pages long each, like that, he's covering stories quick. And it's a lot of them. It's one that would be very hard to skim, I would say. Like there's no way you could really skim through this and understand each one of them at the depth that you could. Like you would just miss a bunch of things if you did that. So he has a very engaging style because it's interesting to read and you want to just keep going on it. It is, there's not a real easy way to summarize it. That's why we didn't really try to go through it at all. There's not a way to just say, this is something you need to do, because there's so many different things here. It's like a whole bunch of little stuff, which are all helpful, but really hard to summarize. So I do really like it. I'm not really sure how to rate this one, though. Like I've been sitting here trying to figure out what to put this at. I'm inclined to put it at a 4.0 because I really like the book, but I'm not real sure what else I want out of it. But it doesn't feel like it's a 5 or even a 4.5. I'm not really sure, but I think I'm putting it at a 4.0, but I don't really have a good rationale for that one, Mike.
Fair enough. Yeah, I struggled with that as well, partly because I felt like because we were reading it for Bookworm, I needed to take good notes on this. I think it would have felt totally different if I was just reading this for fun and I could read these 3-page chapters and just be like, oh, that was interesting, move on to the next one, which is what I did sometimes. But most of these I tried to at least write down like what it actually was so I could decide if it's something that was worth talking about. So in some ways, this was kind of stressful to read. I'm going to share with you the PDF version of my MindNode file, and you can feel free to put this in the show notes if you want. Excuse any typos because most of it was done on my phone, but it's enormous. And I don't know. I mean, there's definitely I got a lot out of this book. There's a lot in here, and his stories are great. I mean, every single 3-page section, he's got powerful stories. He's got a lot of research that he cites. Like, I'm very impressed by the amount of work that went into this book. But that being said, it's definitely not a 5-star in my opinion either. And because of the way that I went through it, I kind of dreaded it in some sense, because I guess it comes back to the chauffeur knowledge thing. Like, I knew that he really understood this stuff a lot better than I did. I felt a little bit inadequate, I guess, getting on the microphone today and talking about this stuff, because I'm like, I don't really understand what all this stuff is. Yet 3 pages isn't enough to help me understand procrastination or the gambler's fallacy or any of that stuff. So I struggle with this as well. I think I'm going to meet you at the 4.0. It's definitely like a lot of great content, which is why I can't really justify rating it lower than that. But it also wasn't anything that just blew me out of the water and is like, oh, this is amazing. I can't wait to tell everybody I know about this book. Certain people, I think, will get a lot out of this book. I also think that it's going to be completely overwhelming for some people as well.
Right. Yep, I'm with you. I think a lot of what we do on Bookworm could come across as the chauffeurs thing, but just know, listeners, we're learning this as we go. Like, we just finished the book, so we're talking about something we just read. So just be aware of that. So yep. I don't know that we really need to change anything for that. It's just something that it's just the nature of the show. That's the way it goes. So we got a couple 4.0s there, and what we've got for upcoming books. See, this one was your choice. Next one's mine. Upcoming is The Legend of the Monk and the Merchant by Terry Felber. And this is the last of the Dave Ramsey books, Mike.
Nice.
So we get through this one and no more Dave Ramsey books. I don't know if I'm excited about that, sad about that. It just is. It
means we can go work for Dave Ramsey, right?
Ooh, there you go. What you got after that?
I mentioned I actually met him. Well, didn't actually meet him. I saw him at an EntreLeadership one-day event, and he's an interesting guy. I really appreciate his perspective on leadership specifically. Everybody kind of knows him as the money guy, but I think that the money principles that he teaches on his show and stuff like that, like those have application in a lot of different ways, which is why EntreLeadership is kind of a cool brand. The whole time I was sitting there, though, I was kind of thinking to myself, there's no way I could work for this guy.
That is actually a conversation I've had to have with my wife before, because he is always looking for Ruby on Rails developers, which is my bread and butter. So I have had to have this conversation before, but always the bullet that kills it every single time is you have to live in Tennessee to work for him. And we're pretty firmly rooted in Minnesota. So that's not something that I would need to consider in reality, but it is a conversation I've had to have before.
Yeah. One after that is one that I picked up a little bit ago and is one of those classics, I guess. Think and Grow Rich by Napoleon Hill. And I think this will be interesting to cover on Bookworm, and it kind of fills a spot in the library, kind of like 7 Habits of Highly Effective People did, where it's like, okay, you guys talk about productivity books, but you haven't covered this one yet. So that's really a justification. I don't know much about this book other than a couple people that I really respect have recommended it. It was written quite a while ago, though, so it'll be interesting to go through this.
Yeah, I'm excited about that one as well. For a Gap book, I am reading Getting Things Done, Mike.
The other one.
Oh, right, the other one. Yeah, it's by Edwin Bliss. So this is one, and maybe we should be doing this one for Bookworm. I don't know. But I had this one recommended to me by Mike Vardy over on The Productivityist. And he mentioned that he shared this on Instagram. People kind of went nuts wanting to know something about it. And I happened to order it, and I didn't really think about that a whole lot. So I posted a picture of the order of books I had come in, and everybody wanted to know about this one. I was like, oh, I get what you're saying, Mr. Vardy. Like that's, yeah, people always, what is that? Like, oh, yeah, well, it's from way back before David Allen did his book. This one is, what was it? It was published in 1976. So
nice.
It's an older one. So I'm going to go through that one. Just kind of curious as to what a mid-70s version of getting things done is.
And the one that I have for a Gap book, I don't think I've mentioned this one before, but I couldn't go back and see if I had mentioned it on the last show or not. And that is Confessions of the Pricing Man by Herman Simon. And this is an economics book in a lot of ways. It talks about like the subtitle says, how price affects everything. It uses a lot of stories and a lot of examples of what happened when companies did this sort of thing. And so that's kind of right up my alley. I'm a little bit of a nerd when it comes to that sort of stuff, understanding why companies launch a product at a specific price point and the impact that it has. He uses stories in there about how people were like on the verge of bankruptcy. They doubled their price and all of a sudden they're doing really well, even though the product didn't change. Like the number of sales goes up because they just raised the price. And so this kind of goes along with our discussion on the marketing, but I want to understand how this really impacts selling products. And I want to be able to use the principles that are in here in a lot of the projects that I'm working on, not in a manipulative way like we talked about today, but just understanding the economics behind things.
Yeah, last time you were talking about 10% Happier.
Oh, yeah.
Was the one you were going through last time. So, I don't know, it sounds interesting. Maybe I should pick this one up as well. That looks like an interesting topic.
This was a recommendation by Tan and also Brooks from Asian Efficiency, and I have not been disappointed yet by a book that Tan has recommended. So
okay, good to know. I know that I'm wrapping up the list of books that I had, because I tend to select my books like 5 in a row and just plan them all out. And I'm coming up to the end of that, and I need to start filling in what my next 5 are going to be. And I'm planning to do that 100% from the book recommendations from listeners, at least on my end of things. I don't know what Mike's going to do, but listeners, if you're listening to this, because if you're hearing this, you're listening to this, but I'm going to be going through those book recommendations and selecting at least 5 for my selections in the upcoming list. So if you want to get your book on that list, bookworm.fm/recommend, fill it out, send it in. I'll get it, and I'll put it on the book list, and I'll look through that book list whenever I'm selecting those, and maybe yours will be selected. There you go.
Nice. Yeah, I've selected a couple from the list. I've not batched them like you're talking about. But yeah, I'll definitely pick some from the list as well. I try to balance them between books that I've been recommended and books that I wanted to read for a while. But if you want to give us some feedback, we would really appreciate it. If you wanted to leave us a 5-star review so we could upend KCRW from the top spot when you search for Bookworm on iTunes, we would really appreciate it. But all of that feedback really helps guide the show. We do listen to it, and we want to hear what you think. So you can either contact us via the website or give us an iTunes review if you've got a moment. That would really help other people find the show, and we would really appreciate it.
Yeah, I'm one that's going to go through the list for sure for selecting next books. I know that I tend to get some other recommendations here and there. For some reason, I seem to do those as Gap books for some reason. They tend to fall into that category for me. But I don't know. We'll see where I land. So get your recommendations in. I'm going to be selecting from that. And if you're reading along with us and listening along, the one that we're doing up next is The Legend of the Monk and the Merchant. We'll go through that one next time.